You're listening to Cat Tales, the podcast of SLC Faculty Local 417, your union connection. Each episode, we bring you real stories from our members, practical tips on your rights, and the kind of information that helps us all move forward.
This week in Ontario's college system felt less like a news cycle and more like a pressure test. Everywhere you turn, something's shifting. Government intervention, mergers wrapped in mystery, layoffs, grievances, and a workload system straining under the weight of it all. Welcome back to Cat Tales. I'm your host, Julie White. And in this episode, we're connecting the dots. We'll start with the unprecedented move at Conestoga College, where the Ford government has replaced the entire board of governors with a single supervisor, a decision raising alarms across the province. Then we head to Fleming, where we talked to our faculty union counterpart, Mike BENEDICT, about the merger we're both navigating that keeps changing names but never offers answers, leaving our campuses stuck in uncertainty. And later we chat with GILLIAN AXTEN about why arbitration cases have doubled across the province, why one decision can reshape the entire sector, and why understanding your SWIFT and understanding the WMG matters more than ever. Finally, we catch up with Greg Dickson from Loyalist College to chat about how the first few days of bargaining for the CAAT part-time and sessional contract have gone. It's a lot to hold, but it's the reality we're living in, a system under strain and a workforce trying to make sense of it in real time. So let's begin where the shockwave started. The Ford government has placed Conestoga College under the control of a single government-appointed supervisor, Linda Franklin, effectively replacing the Board of Governors with one person. According to the ministry, this move follows an audit that uncovered egregious financial decisions which lacked appropriate oversight. That's the government's language. What's the union's response? It's sharper and honestly harder to ignore. OPSU-SEFPO President J.P. Hornick didn't mince words. They called the situation a dangerous precedent, a system where starving public institutions of funding creates the perfect conditions for opportunists to thrive. And then there's the part that made headlines, the $3 million payout to outgoing President John Tibbetts at Conestoga, the same leader the ministry now describes as part of the problem. JP's take? That money should be going back to the students and the hundreds of workers already walked out the door. But here's the thing, this didn't come out of nowhere. Faculty and staff at Conestoga and across the province have been raising alarms for years. They've been pointing out the same issues the audit finally confirmed: a lack of oversight, a lack of transparency, and a governance structure that allows presidents to operate like CEOs of private corporations rather than leaders of public institutions. Local 237 President Leopold Koff said it plainly. If Conestoga is going to rebuild trust, the audit needs to be made public immediately. Support staff President Vicky Poirier added that anything less would look like the ministry's trying to sweep this mess under the rug after waiting too long to act. And that's the part that sticks with me, because this isn't just about Conestoga. It's about a system that's been underfunded, deregulated, and pushed toward private sector logic for more than a decade. JP pointed out that the same government now claiming to fix the problem has spent years legislating away transparency and eroding community control, even ramming through the laws to shield their own records from scrutiny. So when the ministry swoops in with a single supervisor and says, "Don't worry, we've got this," it's fair to ask, got what exactly? The crisis they helped create? Here's what OPSU-SEFPO's calling for, and honestly, what every college community deserves. A, full transparency about what the audit found. B, accountability for the decisions that led to this collapse. C, a governance model that actually involves workers and community. And D, above all, adequate public funding, so colleges can serve the people they were designed to support, not chase revenue in the dark. Because the solution isn't more government overreach, and it's not more secrecy. It's rebuilding a system that's been allowed to drift so far from its public mission that a single person can now be put in charge of an entire college. That's not stability. That's not accountability. That's a warning. And if you're listening from SLC or Fleming or any other campus in Ontario, you already know what happened at Conestoga isn't an isolated event. It's a symptom. The question now is whether the province treats it as a wake-up call or just another headline to manage. So last week I had the chance to attend the CAAT divisional and pre-bargaining session with representatives from across Ontario's colleges. And when you sit down to talk to people in the college system right now, you hear a lot of the exact same words: confusion, fear, frustrations. And every so often you meet somebody who can articulate kind of all of what's going on with the kind of clarity that starts to cut through the fog. And that's what happened when I sat down to talk to Mike Benedict from Fleming College about the merger.
I'm a professor with Fleming College, have been for about 10 years, and I'm the unit steward for our local.
Mike sits on their CESC committee, which means he's often across the table from senior executives, the people who should theoretically know what's happening in our system. But lately, those meetings are starting to feel like staring contests with a lot of uncertainty.
I sit on our CSC committee and a few other things at the college, and I sit across from EVPs who say we don't know anything. Like, don't we? And their facial expression, I almost believe them. They seem almost as baffled as we are, and it's incredibly frustrating and frightening.
And similar to the town hall that was held at SLC, where Glenn walked us through what was happening with the merger or integration, as he called it at the time, Fleming College also had an online town hall.
It was 11 minutes in duration. Our acting president, who's very careful to make sure everybody refers to her as our acting president, spoke for 11 minutes. She spoke as if we were kindergarten children, refused any and all questions. Most people I know couldn't last the 11 minutes. They turned it off after minute 2 because it became pretty obvious there were no answers being given.
No questions, no dialogue, no clarity. Just a live stream of reassurance without substance, and a community left to sit with the silence afterward. Mike says the emotional temperature on campus has shifted.
I think it's just a continuation of fear. I think everybody has gotten to a point where they think about themselves because that's all they can cope with right now. Like, what does this mean to me? We don't have any answers. Thankfully, I appreciate them all because they aren't coming to us demanding answers because they know we don't have them either, and our ways to get them are pretty limited.
And then there's the language, the shifting vocabulary that makes everything feel a little more unstable.
Nobody knows. There's been nothing further in the media. Language has changed. Like, the initial stuff that came out was merger, merger, merger. And then it was integration, and then it was partnership. So even the terminology has changed. And even we caught our president in our town hall. The first thing she said was merger, and then she corrected herself. So I think even just their word choice is sort of selective, and there's probably a reason, but we don't know. Okay. And rumors are burying us because every time somebody raises an eyebrow, we read a whole bunch into it.
But amid all that uncertainty, there was one bright spot: the Save Education rally. Here at St. Lawrence, we participated in the April 30th rally at Nolan Quinn's office. At Fleming College, they watched hundreds of people come in support of education from across the province.
The day was amazing. Had to sort of wipe a tear to the corner of my eye when I saw a carload of people coming from Sudbury at 5 a.m. It was so sweet how far and wide people came. Turnout was great. Energy was good. The rain held off until the very end, so even nature wanted us to be there.
Their local MPP, however, didn't share that enthusiasm.
Unfortunately, our politician friend would not participate in any meaningful way. When he heard a rally was scheduled, he canceled a meeting that we had scheduled with him just to present some concerns. He said we were taking an adversarial approach, so the canceling of the meeting was our fault. But it wasn't a day of college protest. It was a day of educational protest. So we had people from high schools, public schools, all of our sister unions were there. It was a day where everybody participated.
It was very similar to the greeting that we got from MPP Nolan Quinn in Cornwall. Meanwhile, inside Fleming, the instability continues. 4 years of layoffs, 6 rounds of employment stability meetings. Mike doesn't mince the words about that process.
So this is our 4th year of layoffs, and it's the 6th time that we've had to engage employment stability in that time.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to change the terminology of that because it's anything but stability.
Yeah.
It's the farthest thing from it.
And that instability makes it harder to get members to step into leadership roles.
I think we went from anger to fear pretty quickly. Most people don't know whether they have a job next week. As soon as employment stability meets, everybody looks to wonder if it's their turn. Yeah. So getting people to take those positions, to step up, is really hard, because there's a perception that by working or engaging with the union, you're painting a target on your back. And we've lost some senior executives in our local, so there may be a bit of truth to that. I don't know.
Before we wrapped, Mike wanted to speak directly to the people listening, the faculty and staff who are living through this moment with him.
Just know that the men and women that volunteer for your union are just that. We volunteer and we're trying, but the system's broken. So if you have to be patient for some stuff, just know that we're at home fretting about wanting to give it to you. We're trying to find it for you, and we're doing everything we can.
Working in the dark is exhausting. Working in the dark while trying to guide others, that's something else entirely. And we're feeling it here at our local as well. But Mike, like so many others across the province, keeps showing up, keeps asking questions, keeps holding the flashlight. Because even when leadership won't turn on the lights, someone has to help people find their way through the hallway.
Know your rights.
Before we get into our next conversation, I want to give listeners some context. You're about to hear from Gillian AXTEN. Right now, Gillian's on sabbatical, but we were thrilled to run into her at the college's divisional and pre-bargaining conference in Toronto from May 7th to 9th. As a member of the arbitration scheduling committee, Gillian presented a report at the conference on the exploding numbers of arbitrations across the system, and those numbers were staggering. We started talking, it became clear that her perspective, especially at this moment in the layoffs, workload pressure, and systemic structural change, needed to be part of this episode. So what you're about to hear is a conversation between two colleagues on union time, unpacking why arbitration backlogs have doubled, how layoffs across the 24 colleges are overwhelming the system, what it means when one arbitrated decision can shift jurisprudence for everyone, and why understanding your SWIFT and using the WMG is needed, and it matters more than ever. You're also going to hear Gillian talk about something I never thought I'd hear her ever say, a case for full-time faculty stepping into, you guessed it, coordinator roles to protect the collective. Sabbatical has changed her. In some ways she'll admit, and in some ways she'll deny. But what hasn't changed is her clarity about the stakes. Let's get into it. Yeah. So can you just start by giving us a bit of a view in terms of what's happened in the arbitration scheduling world in the last 1 to 2 years?
So let me contextualize this. I'm the co-chair of the Joint Grievance Scheduling Committee, which means we schedule all CAAT grievances into arbitration. That means support staff and faculty, full-time faculty and full-time support staff. Part-time are not included in this. So that full-time faculty means full-time or partial load. So within that collective agreement, we started out in my mandate, which would have been 4 years ago, with about 300 to schedule. We are now well over 700. The reason why we've gotten there so fast is twofold. One, so many layoffs. So many layoffs. Conestoga, over 100, nearly 80 grievances from them alone, and a bunch of other colleges in that range. So that's one reason. The other is a bunch of leftover grievances from the support staff strike that are still waiting either to be heard within our system or by arbitrator Kaplan. And the third major reason is we don't have enough arbitrators. And the arbitrators that we do have give us very limited dates. Arbitrators are theoretically supposed to give us 2 dates a month. We are lucky if we get 1 date a month from most. So in the last few months, we have about 40 days max, somewhere between 30 and 40 days over a 2-month period. So if you do the math, that's 15 days in a month. And then we have to separate that evenly between us and support staff.
So what does that mean for somebody who maybe has been sitting and waiting?
The colleges are all asked for what their priority is. If they don't give us a priority, then we schedule based on layoff or dismissal first or accommodation second. Most of the time, our college, because I'm the representative, I give our priority, and it's usually the person who's been laid off, dismissed, disciplined, or in need of accommodation.
Are most of those arbitrations that are being discussed right now related to some form of layoff or dismissal?
Yeah, we have about 75% are related to layoff or dismissal. The other 25% are accommodations. We have the occasional oddity, like academic freedom, that pop in, but it's really based on the college's priority. So each college gets 2 dates a month. So that means St. Lawrence College faculty gets 2 dates, St. Lawrence College support staff gets 2 dates. Because we are well established within the system, we usually get both of those dates, but there are some smaller colleges that only ever get one.
When we consider that using a grievance is the lever that we have to defend our collective agreement, what does that mean in terms of how well the system can work?
So the system works, but it's incredibly slow. And that's the problem for an individual member is the timeline. So last month, let's say, we were scheduling for October and November. So with our layoffs that occurred this month, we'll be scheduling June 6th. And so anybody who grieves the earliest they could get a date will be November or December. That will be the earliest. The colleges also have a great, great tactic, and that is the denial of the first and second date. On the third date, it's the third strike. They must accept that date. So we can assume that if the arbitration moved forward to June 6th arbitration, which would be ridiculously quickly even there, the college could deny November. We would then schedule in September for December. It could be denied in December. And then when we schedule in October, the January date would have to be accepted. So the
Okay.
earliest possible date, if a person grieved today, would be January. Usually it's in the 8-month to a year range before a grievance can be heard. And that's one grievance. If we have 9 or 10, we're only going to be able to take 2 at a time.
We have had a grievance that we have filed against the college related to the merger. And what does that process look like? Does that go through the same kind of scheduling procedures as everything else?
So the hearing, from my understanding, was last week. That was the step 1 hearing. We'll get a written response within 3 weeks. If we disagree with that written response, we'll forward it to arbitration. Arbitration scheduling committee doesn't sit during the July-August period, so it won't be referred then until September to arbitration. The issue will be, it will be in competition with an individual person who's been laid off. And so we have these competing grievances. We have staffing grievances, we have other grievances in queue, and we have layoff grievances.
So we start to see how these many worlds start to collide at the bottleneck of scheduling a grievance hearing.
And we get into even a bigger bottleneck or a bigger issue is we're not the only people doing this, right? There are 24 colleges, 22 of the 24 all have layoffs. They'll all be grieving. One bad arbitrated decision from one griever can then stymie everybody because that becomes past precedent. So as I've told anybody who will listen to me, I don't care if I win, but I can't lose. And I'll tell members that. And the reason why I say I can't lose is not GILLIAN ego. It's a loss for St. Lawrence College or the member is a loss for the collective. And we have to have that collective ideology with everything we do because one decision, one written decision impacts everybody.
Let's shift to workload. What should people be thinking about as SWIFTs come out?
We all just got our SWIFTs. And so just a couple of reminders. You have 5 days to accept your SWIFT or deny your SWIFT. If you deny your SWIFT, it doesn't mean you hate your manager or anything else. It just means you don't agree with what's written on the page. And if you come to an understanding between the time you tick off the box, which says go to workload monitoring group, and the time you actually have that meeting and you've come to a decision and you've settled it all, you can always withdraw it. But if you don't tick off that box and send it within 5 days, then you're stuck with whatever's written on the page.
What do you say to somebody who's reluctant to sign off because they don't want their employer to look at them for the next round of layoffs?
Layoffs are all about seniority. They are all about where you are on that seniority list. If the program still exists, if the program is robust, and if you're high up on the seniority list, you're going to have a job. If your program is gone, or if you're going to get bumped by someone because their program is gone at a higher level, then you're going to be put on a layoff list. It has absolutely nothing to do with performance, with acceptance of a SWIFT, with how much you hate your manager, or what shoe size you are. It has to do with the seniority list and whether or not the program is gone.
Yep.
Or, in some cases, whether or not the program numbers have shrunk.
So what we want to do is sign back to say you disagree with this,
Yeah.
refer to WMG, and do that within 5 business days. So we have until Friday of the current week.
The things that people need to be aware of, and you need to know how to read your SWIFT. Look at the evaluation factor. If you are not giving a Blackboard graded test, if you are not giving a multiple choice test, if you are not giving something that is automatically graded, you should have a 0.035 grading or evaluation factor. If you get the blended factor, it means that you are giving a non-graded assignment graded by a machine, and you are not touching it. You're just inputting the mark. At least 50% of your coursework is automatically graded. Let me repeat that for those in the back. It means 50% of your evaluation is not graded by you. So Article 11 is our friend. Read it, understand it. If you don't, ask questions. Ask questions of your manager, ask questions of your steward. And you can always say, check WMG, because it buys you more time. And then you can ask your questions, because you can always withdraw. The second thing that I noticed is a lot of members will agree to overtime at the 0.25, 0.3 of an hour overtime, because they're like, it's not that much. The reality is you're going to be given that class, that SWIFT, with that overtime, and you will never see a red cent. You will never see a dime of that overtime. Why? Because 10 weeks in, we do an audit. And the audit is based not only on the number of courses we teach, but the number of students we have. So I've never met a program that doesn't have at least 2 or 3 students who drop it, especially if you're teaching first years. And so what's going to happen is they're going to recalculate your SWIFT. And in that recalculation, the numbers section, the number of students that are calculated in that spreadsheet is going to drop. And therefore, you're going to drop out of overtime. And so what you're doing is you're taking on an extra course for 0 pay. That extra course could be given by a part-timer to make them partial load, or to another full-timer.
And Gillian, you've changed your tune on coordinatorships?
You've all heard me say, anybody who knows me will say, coordinators, they're the strangest breed I've ever met. And why in the Lord's name would anybody want to be a coordinator? And for the love of God, don't do it. And so now I'm going to eat crow, and I'm going to say I am suggesting the opposite. And not because I think that coordinators should be doing the work, because I think the workload is bananas, and I think you're taken advantage of as a coordinator, and I still stand by all the reasons why I said that before. But from a collective, what management is now doing is abhorrent. What they're doing is, if the coordinator is not a full-time faculty, they are offloading it to a partial load, and they are paying them as a support staff, a part-time support staff. And so they're no longer partial load. If they don't have enough coursework, they're given this contract at a rate that is obscenely less than what we get paid to do exactly the same work. And I'm not going to go into all of the jurisprudence, but unfortunately, OPSU made some decisions, and it put us in this weird predicament where now management can leverage an arbitration in order to make this happen. So if you are given the option of taking on the coordinatorship and you are a full-time faculty, I can't believe I'm recommending this, but please, 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 for all that is holy, take it. And yes, that even means me if I need to, because that will, A, save a full-time job because we're offloaded for coordinatorship, and B, it will demonstrate that the work needs to be done by a faculty and be paid at a faculty rate.
Oh, Gillian, that was very big of you.
Yeah, if I wind up as coordinator, I'm going to really be sad. But I will do it because it is the right thing to do for the collective.
Now for part-time and all-in with Dale Gartshore.
Welcome back to Cattails. Now, if you've just caught our stinger at the start of the segment, you may be expecting to hear from Dale Gartshore. But as anyone who's ever been in the middle of a bargaining cycle knows, schedules shift as fast as proposals do. Instead, we're incredibly lucky to be joined today by the vice chair of your bargaining team, Greg Dickson, who also hails from Loyalist College. Greg's fresh off the first few dates with the College Employer Council, and he's here to pull back the curtain. Greg, it's been 2 weeks since the first 2 dates with the CC for our part-time sessional folks. You've had a bit of time to let the dust settle. How's it gone?
I mean, it's been interesting. Definitely think we started off with a bit of a banger of a opening day. It's taken, whether you want to say 20 years to get this all to the table, from the original efforts of staff and faculty from, way back when, or the 7 or 8 years it took to count the ballots. We finally got to the table, so that in itself is a historic day. But additionally, we also started off our day at the table a bit differently. We started by introducing ourselves with personal statements, and more than "Hi, I'm Greg from this college, and I've been teaching for a decade." We got into a lot more of the kind of personal details about, what brought us to this faculty profession, where have we actually been in the colleges, what is the lived experiences that we've each had on the bargaining team, as well as our bargaining team advisors. And we really wanted to make it known to the College Employer Council for this first ever round of bargaining for our unit that precarity is at the forefront of a lot of our issues. Whether it's every 4 months, we have no idea what our lives are going to be with the way it is for contract faculty, partial load included, or whether it's not knowing what my pay is going to be at which college for those of us who teach at multiple colleges, trying to figure out, the weird navigation from part-time to partial load to sessional. And sometimes we get benefits in sick days or sick hours, and sometimes we don't, as well as, what we get out of it in terms of why we do this job, the focus we have on trying to offer the best education to our students, and that a lot of us as well are in some way, shape, or form pillars in our own community. And we really also wanted to emphasize the importance of our community colleges in our community, and not just what we individually bring, to the table into our college, but that kind of greater impact that we have. So they did indulge us to let us all say our personal introductions, because they were a good 3 to 5 minutes long per person, so not their usual expectation. But we're hoping we can enlighten them as to what is this actual precarious system that the colleges are so reliant upon for quote unquote flexible workload from their perspective, but the actual implication it has in our side of the fence there. And then we got into our opening statement, where we kind of gave the overview of what's really happening in the college system. What is it like for us and our students and our communities, with everything going on between the provincial chronic underfunding of our education, us watching our programs, some that we personally teach in, get closed or suspended, and going to private education with skills development fund money, as well as we only briefly found out just before the merger of St. Lawrence and Fleming College out of seemingly nowhere, although that's of course debatable. So there was a lot that we went through on that. We had JP for the whole opening day, which was lovely. We also had Arm Kennedy, and a good pile of staff from our comms and PAE divisions, as well as Sean and Heather from negotiations. We felt very well resourced and well supported at that table. It's something I've heard that hasn't always been the case in previous rounds, and a different time in OPSU. but now there's no question that our college bargaining teams have that full support of OPSU, both from staff and from the president's office. So that's a wonderful, emboldening thing to see. And JP had some opening comments to share with the CEC as well, as kind of synthesizing and wrapping up our opening statement. And then we came back after lunch, and this is where it really got exciting, as some have probably heard by now. We came back and entered the room. The CEC were already sitting at that table, and we walked past them and sat down. And then a few moments later, we had a plethora of solidarity guests from every CAAT division, both full-time and part-time support and faculty leadership from all 4 divisions come in behind us at the table, and it was just an unprecedented moment, and you could really see the College Employer Council really didn't know what was happening at first. They were quite shocked. I think I remember Peter saying, "Well, that's a lot of people," with a quizzical look on his face. And we got into disclosure, which was, aptly timed with the Fleming and St. Lawrence merger, of course. And each of the other CAAT units got to make a speech to the College Employer Council about the lack of disclosure in their prior bargaining rounds as it related to college restructuring, changes to programming, and the obvious campus mergers and or closures that especially the support staff from full-time were quite emotional about, having gone through their round and watching several campus closures happen immediately. So we got through most of it. They called for a caucus at one point after they got a little emotional by the looks of it there, but did resume and let everyone kind of speak their piece. I still remember their labor negotiations vice chair Peter saying, "This is going to be a problem," or "This is problematic," something like that, as he saw us get into the thick of things. But before they could walk away for the caucus, we got to see out of a hoodie 2 giant stacks of paper that were the unfair labor practices about the failure to disclose to not only the previous bargaining units for all 3 other CAAT units, but for my bargaining unit, where we are mid-active bargaining and we had outstanding disclosure, which is what we wanted to talk about to begin with before the St. Lawrence and Fleming merger, but now especially, because nowhere was that mentioned to us or to anyone at OPSU that this was going to be something coming down the pipe. That is a very important thing for us to have an idea, for our members to have an idea of what really needs to be fought for and looked at the bargaining table for the sake of stability and dealing with the ever-present issue of precarity that now is very much at the forefront of all 4 of our college employee units. So that was a very cathartic moment for some members in that room that had been there working with the CEC for a good 2 or more decades, and finally having that moment that they've said multiple times they never thought they would get to see, maybe in their lifetime, of all 4 units together in that room. And not only that, but also handing an unfair labor practice over to Graham Lloyd, and a member of Fleming College on the College Employer Council there. So quite a moment. And then we saw quite a shift in bargaining after that. I guess that first day was very much a highlight. It was very exciting, passionate, and emotional for my team to get to have that first day at the table and, tell the College Employer Council what we really think is happening. But our second day, we got into resuming with the final pieces of disclosure, which I think at the moment we said that word, sent up some hair on the back of people's neck on the College Employer Council side after the previous day's events. And so it was good that at least that they were paying attention to that and took good note of that.
Basically, the message was you're no longer going to be able to pit the different units against one another.
Yeah, definitely. Like, we're wall-to-wall CAAT, to put it bluntly. I mean, the colleges have screwed over all 4 of our units, especially within these last few years. Especially with how hard they fought for my part-time sessional unit to get certified in the first place. And I think that really, resonated well for us, and maybe resonated poorly for them, that they are seeing us finally fighting the same fight against these campus mergers and closures and program suspensions, and kind of what we're seeing as the precursor to the death of our community college system, and that we're willing to fight for it. And they did at least mention that, they did want to try and work with us. So I'm hoping that there is an opportunity for meaningful collaboration with everything going on remains to be seen.
Okay.
But hopefully there is that path forward for all 4 of our units. We're all fighting against the same issues. One college might be better off than the other, but overall in the college system, it's a very rough time that we all have to unite behind and work together and see how we can support each other for each other's bargaining rounds.
Certainly the message I got was we have to raise the floor. This round of bargaining is going to be different. Do you think Graham
I
Lloyd
think so,
certainly got that
especially once
message
we
as well?
received that giant stack of an unfair labor practice. Must have been a pleasure to carry out of that room. But yeah, I think he definitely started paying attention a bit more after that moment and having, us wall-to-wall CAAT in the room, getting ULP on opening day after the long journey it took us to get to that table for this unit, and for a lot of members that were supporting us and staff supporting us in that room.
Good. And in terms of next steps, do you
So
have
we
another
have
date
May
booked?
27th and June again. Of course, it really stuck with us, them asking but what about the fall though? Do you have fall dates? And again, we're like, I don't know. Like all of us mentioned this, we don't have our contracts yet. So we don't know when we're free. And we are working through, we gave each other our table to ground rules at the end of the second day. So we will find out what they do and don't accept on the 27th, and they alluded to having something for us to take a look at on the 27th. So we're waiting in ominous anticipation. That raising the
All
floor
right.
piece is really key. Getting our members to understand, there's been a lot of being pitted against each other over the years by the colleges, and that needs to change. We have a much better chance of getting what our members need, both locally and centrally at the bargaining table, if we can all work together. It's the colleges that are taking the jobs away, that are causing the layoffs, that are causing the contract non-renewals. It's not your colleague that is actively choosing to do this, regardless of what unit they're in. This is the manufactured crisis between the colleges and the province that we're having to deal with the fallout for. Where can we work together across all 4 units to try and find common demands that we have at the table, especially dealing with job stability lately, so that we can try and make it better for those in the part-time units to have more job protections and total compensation packages so that they're not as exploitable by the colleges as we're currently seeing, so that people in the full-time or even regular part-time have more stability in those jobs and aren't just being shoved to the race to the bottom for the sake of a college saving a dime here and there in a spreadsheet, even though it's having phenomenally terrible impacts on ourselves, our students, and our communities. So we need to band
Yeah.
together.
And wouldn't disclosure be amazing if we were actually informed of what challenges were and brought to the table and help problem solve and do everything we can to support our colleges? You've got so much value in the people that work there, and there's so much depth of experience and awareness and knowledge and planning and everything else that if we were actually at the table and contributing instead of just being people that things are done to.
And now,
Wouldn't it be incredible?
another fun
I live in a
episode of
perfect world
Is It a
sometimes,
Gripe or a Grievance?
Hey, Gillian. My manager has determined that I should only get a blended factor of .0225 on my SWIFT for a course that involves a huge amount of grading, specifically essays and projects. When I complained, they told me I should just put in multiple choice tasks. Can I grieve this?
UMG, so Workload Monitoring Group. As soon as you get an official SWIFT, within 5 days, you can take it to the Workload Monitoring Group. They are a team, 3 managers, 3 faculty who will look at the learning plan, preferably a signed learning plan for that year, and if not, one from last year, that indicates that there is no multiple choice, that this is an inappropriate way of evaluating. You are the subject matter expert. You get to choose how you evaluate. So let's use communications as an example. Multiple choice tests in a comms class is stupid. No offense, but come on, how do you teach how to write with a multiple choice test or read or even think? You don't. So it's up to you as the subject matter expert to say, no. I need evaluation of project factor because this is how I'm evaluating. And the only way we can get any form of decision is through WMG. And if WMG can't make a decision, if we can't come on the same page or the team can't, they will take it to a WRA, which is workload arbitration. These things happen reasonably quickly, but members have a hard deadline. You have 5 days from the moment you get that final SWIFT. So as soon as the manager starts talking to you, if you miss it, you're SOL. You have 5 days. And so you need to start, once your manager starts talking to you and you say, I need 0.35, and they say, oh no, just give multiple choice tests, you need to be ready to tick the box off with WMG. You can always withdraw afterwards, but you have 5 days and that's written in stone.
Okay.
You've been listening to Cat Tales, stories that matter to faculty and beyond. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Visit slcfaculty.ca and stay connected with us on social media.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policies, positions, or statements of OPSU, SEFPO, St. Lawrence College, or any affiliated organizations. This podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. While every effort is made to ensure accuracy, SLC Faculty Local 417 makes no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, about the completeness, reliability, or suitability of the information shared. Any reliance placed on such information is strictly at the listener's own risk. Music and sound effects used in this podcast are licensed or royalty-free. We respect copyright law and encourage our listeners do the same.